all skid and wire strapped, and then a truckman should be called in. This way the unit is received undamaged. All right. The next thing we want to look into is the hooking up of the chain on all 81-200 classes. The chain, which will be packed in your accessory box or perhaps in the drawer of the table when you receive the unit, is like this here. It's got an S hook on either end. And what I do is I take this chain and I drop it down through a hole, which is right behind the machine. Can you get that on the camera, cuz? Mark, you got it?
Beautiful hole.
I'll use the screwdriver as a pointer. And you drop that chain down the hole, and you take this S hook, and you just merely put it in the feed wheel lifting lever. Then we're going to take the opposite end of the chain and connect it to the pedal, which will lift the feed wheel. The pedal has a big S hook. You take the little S hook, you pass it through the upper part of the large S hook, like I just did, and connect the chain into one of the holes here, and you must leave the chain loose. Never ever have the chain tight. It must be loose. That's it. Now when you step on your pedal, your feed wheel, as you can see on top of the machine, lifts. Okay, fine. The next step, I would assume, should be the threading of the machine. We're going to show you how to thread the 81-200 class wraparound unit first, because that only uses 2 threads, whereas the 81-200 class regular Serge uses 3. Each 81-200 class received from us at NC comes with a very thorough parts and instruction manual. One for the machine, and if your machine has a rear puller, one for the rear puller. In this case, if we go to the parts and instruction manual, you will see that there's a threading diagram. And if you have an 81-200 wraparound unit, you would go to the page that says NC 81-200 wraparound threading chart. And there's your map to follow the threading. But nothing like hands-on, and that's what we're going to do. Remember, in a wraparound, we use 1 thread and 1 yarn. All right. Being that we're going to show you first how to thread the wraparound machine, the first item on the agenda is you need a spool of BT207, which is a very strong thread which helps the machine in pulling the thread, pulling the yarn completely around. The BT207 comes in 10 basic colors, because that thread really gets pulled into the carpet. You can get it in black, white, natural, brown, burgundy, gray, blue, etc., beige. And so you take that spool of 207 and you should put a sock around it, so that when the machine stops sewing, the 207 doesn't have a tendency to jingle off the spool. And you take your spool of 207, you put it on top of the threading chart of the thread stand, excuse me, and you'll notice up atop of the thread stand there are 2 holes. And we put the thread through the upper hole from the bottom up, in the back door, and out the front. Just that simple. Then we go down to the machine itself. And you can tie a knot to this and then pull it through gently. But actually, let's show you how to thread the machine. So let's remove the thread that is in the machine so that we can't cheat. If your thread breaks, it's going to break by your needle or by your looper, but you should know how to thread the machine, and let's do it. Okay, fine, here we go. We go through this tube, this black tube, which leads to the first tension. First thread, first tension. And we'll go through the black tube, or whatever the hell you want to call it. Tube. There you go. And what I do is I slip the thread down in between the 2 tension discs. Now what we have to do is take this thread and put it in an area that will keep it between the tension discs and prevent it from slipping out. So in between the 2 metal discs, take this thread, slip it underneath that pin and underneath this big black stud and pull it through. We now have the thread in the tension discs and secured so it cannot slip out. Let me show you this one more time. Thread goes through the tunnel of love, comes out through the tension discs, underneath the big black stud, around and underneath that pin, and you just pull it through. Next area, of course, is you go through this big hole or this big thread guide that's shown in the threading chart, and you can sort of logically figure out that's the next area to go to. Then what we do over here is we slip the thread underneath the two tension, in between the two discs, but on the bottom. Then I take this and I slip this on top of the pin, so that it won't come out of the tension disc. Easier said than done. Tell you what we'll do. We'll do it this way. Then we'll take our tweezer, and there we go. By having it come on top of this pin and then in between, it will not let the thread slip out of the discs. Let's do it one more time. Thread comes through here. In between the two discs, I take my tail, pull it around there, and I pull. Now I know that my tension is securely holding the thread and that the thread will not slip out of the tension. Next, you go to this thread guide here. It's got two holes. It doesn't make any difference which one you use. I prefer to use the inside one because it keeps this thread closer to the machine. There. Then we come over here, same business, under the pin on top here, then under the pin and on top of these discs. And you can see why I did it that way, by going under this. You got it, cuz?
Put myself on the procedure.
All right. Let me do it again in front of you, okay? We come over here, we go under the pin and on top of the roller. This is not a tension, it's a roller. By putting it under the pin, it keeps it in the roller. If I don't, she'll slip out. And then we go in between these two discs, and then under that pin. Oop. Okay? I'll point it out with the tweezer. Under this pin, on top of the roller, under this pin, in between these two discs. This is really not a tension so much as just something to hold the thread from jumping. One thing you want to watch out for with your 81-100 class is to make sure that this thread here is always on top of this pull-off. Sometimes, and I don't know how, but this thread works its way behind this pull-off, like this here. Probably because people misthread it. When it does that, the machine will never sew. It must be on top of this at all times, never underneath it. The purpose of this is when the needle bar comes to its lowest point, this needle thread gets pulled off to help formulate a stitch. Okay? And then, of course, the last item is the needle, which it goes from the front of the needle to the back, and you leave about a 6-inch tail. Doesn't really matter how long the tail is, as long as it's not less than 6 inches when you go to start your sewing. If it's shorter than that, it can slip out of the needle as you begin to sew. So we now have threaded the top part of the 81-200 class. Just that simple. Now we're going to thread the wraparound 81-200 class serging yarn. The serging yarn or serging thread is our code S11, and we have a chart which has got 84 different colors.
Ooh,
pretty, huh?
Pretty.
Makes your socks go right up, huh? Now, our serging yarn is 100% cotton. It's rich and it's very strong. We highly recommend it. You're not going to find a